Hello. I believe the first thing we should do is address the elephant in the room that I am not Danny Martin. I am Ed Gallo, in fact. I know it's hard to tell by the tone of my voice that
Who
I'm
the
not
fuck is
Danny.
Danny Martin?
He's our deceased friend, formerly of the fight site. Now, Dan, he changed his name to Dan. He's Dan Martin now. Uh, has formally retired from being a combat sports fan and analyst. I'm not joking, actually. He's got a really big year ahead of him. He's becoming a firefighter and an EMT and pursuing his dreams and doing all that good stuff, saving lives. So as much as we really enjoy making fun of Dan all the time, genuinely wish him the best, and we're keeping in touch with him, and he's our good buddy, and we really thank him for his contributions to the site and to the whole analytical sphere. Really, he's come up with some really amazing stuff. The metagame pieces are going to live on for a long time, and he's just contributed a lot to the discussion, and we've had a really great time with him. But for now he's gone. So here I am to plug in that hole for Sriram. Just love plugging your holes, boy.
I've never heard of him, but he sounds really cool. Shouts to Danny Martin.
Yeah, shouts to Dan. And Ryan's also here, but Ryan, you don't want to be a permanent co-host of the MMA podcast, or you do?
Either one's fine.
Glad
Both are
we're
good.
banging this out on air. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll guest star now and again, but maybe not as a regular thing.
Cool, man.
And of
So
course,
the real
I'm your
host is
usual.
Sriram. Yeah,
So,
go for it.
yeah, Danny is out doing more important things than watch shirtless men fight on air. So that's what I will be covering for the foreseeable future with Ed.
Yes, he is the shirtless man now as a firefighter.
The calendar is
yeah,
going to be
that's true.
sick.
All he's going to be fighting is fire. Yeah, so welcome back to the
I'm gonna
first
start
edition
setting my
of Fight
house on
Sites.
fire just to lure Danny. He'll have to come visit me.
You could have called.
Yeah, this is the first edition of the MMA podcast since like October or something. So that's something. Yeah, I've been very on top of this for good reason because the cards have been either very good or very bad, with the very good ones being like 2 of them and the very bad ones being like 17. So we have a lot to talk about. Most importantly, probably is a Patreon request from one of our patrons, obviously.
Evan
Asking
Lee.
about the best. What's that?
You were totally gonna say his name and then just forgot it.
His name is
I was-
Evan Lee, and he's a
Yeah.
relatively newer patron. He's been very active, so shouts to Evan.
Yeah, thanks for subscribing, Evan. And we're handling this at the very end of the month that you subscribed, I believe. So we are very on top of this, as I mentioned before. It's about the best unathletic fighters in the UFC. So we're going to cover that probably at the end because there's actually a good deal to talk about since we left everything off this last couple months. So to start out, I guess the last 2 pay-per-view main events we can kind of lump together. Figueiredo versus Perez and Figueiredo versus Moreno, probably the fight of the year in there. A very bad decision, in my opinion, and of course, the guillotine over our favorite Dana White Contender Series person. So, Ed, what did you think? I mean, we did cover the Perez fight, like a preview on the panel thing, so you guys should probably go check that out. But what did you think after that fight?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the after as well on the second panel for
the Ferguson Oliveira one.
For that card, yeah. But for those who don't listen to our amazing panels, which you're making a mistake because they're very good, and they have more people on them. So even if you don't like either of us, there are more people to like. But yeah, the Perez fight was a big letdown for me just because I thought Perez looked much improved and like he had a winning game plan cooked up. Was kicking in combination really well, attacking Figueiredo's body, just being really aggressive. And then when he got to his shots, he was getting to that seatbelt like rear standing position really easily. And it looked like he was going to be able to wrestle him a good bit. And now in hindsight, after seeing all the success that Brandon Moreno had, taking him down with body locks over and over again, I'm like, man, he really probably could have took him down a bunch of times. And his top game is way better than Moreno's. So I really thought we were going to see something good happening there. Some maybe Perez putting a ride on him. But yeah, from that seatbelt position, I think. Well, first Figueiredo, he sat back into a leg lock, but I think at some point he reached behind to get the neck, and I was like, whatever, that guillotine's not in. I'm not worried about that. And then he kept it, and he elevated, and he got his guard back, and then even when he had his guard, and Perez was sitting up, I'm like, he still doesn't have this because I could see so much of Perez's neck, and that's usually a sign that's not actually doing anything. It's not like cutting anything off. So I don't know what kind of choke it was, like if it was like actually cutting off blood or if it was just crushing his neck or whatever. But he tapped him with that, and that was really sad for me. It was like crazy impressive because Figueiredo was just an animal, and clearly he knows what he's doing with that he could force that. But I mean, that sucked for me as someone that really likes Perez, although I did expect Figueiredo to win. But if I thought Figueiredo was going to win, I thought it would because Perez like couldn't wrestle him, or if he was like getting pieced up standing. I didn't think it would go down like that specifically. So disappointing because that was looking like a really good fight right away. But we got more Figueiredo content right afterwards, so it's not a huge loss.
Yep. Ryan, your thoughts? I mean, I remember you said some very smart things about Perez after the fight. So
Yeah, I don't really have too many thoughts that Ed didn't already elaborate on. I was I was also disappointed that the fight ended so early. I was really interested in how the matchup was going to shake out. Um, yeah, Fig's dynamism is the main story of that fight. I think Perez was doing all the right things. He was getting in on his takedown setups well, and that single leg that he held for a while and then eventually chain wrestled to a finish was really impressive. And then Fig just shocked him with the guillotine. And it was a really slick one too. I forget exactly what situation they were in, but he kind of like turned to expose his back a little bit, and then when Perez, instead of like going over to a ride or going to his back, he was kind of trying to come on top, and then Fig used that to turn into him and get that head and arm grip right away. Really impressive there. And yeah, I'd like to see them fight at some other point down the line, but Perez needs to get quite a bit more on his resume before he's ready for another fight there. I think he could still do well against Figueiredo. I thought it was a close fight coming into that, and what happened didn't really necessarily change my opinion of that because it was kind of just a shock finish. But at the same time, it kind of makes me hesitant to wonder whether Perez would be able to just avoid getting sparked out randomly in a rematch.
yeah, I mean, I think obviously it ended with the wrestling and the grappling, so that takes like a majority of it. But I think the striking exchanges were pretty interesting. Just considering how long the fight went, which was like a minute. Um, Figueiredo, we saw against Moreno especially how smart he could be in using his power to limit more volume, like minute winner type fighters, and he was smashing Perez's body from the opener with the hard open side body kicks and the left hook to the body from close stance. So that's something that if the fight went longer, I think Perez probably would have had trouble enforcing any kind of volume edge. But yeah, as I'd mentioned, the fact that Moreno was able to pretty much body lock Figueiredo at will says some good things about a Formiga rematch if that ever happens, but it shouldn't. And about a potential Perez rematch if Perez can go away and
Or
get
maybe a
some
shot,
wins.
man. Just let it go.
No, I will not. Shut up. But I mean, he's released anyway, and he's never coming back. But yeah, it says some good things about Perez's chances as well as Ed
It's still
mentioned.
real to Sriram, God damn it.
Well, we're talking about unathletic fighters later, so we have to keep the gimmick. But Formiga is as unathletic as ever and would also be Figueiredo 10 out of 10. Fuck you. But yeah, so Figueiredo seemed to have a good idea of what he was doing against Perez on the feet, but Perez also had a good idea with the kicking game on the outside and generally just trying to deny the pocket for Figueiredo. He was getting pressured reasonably easily, but he also used that to get in on his takedown when Figueiredo did his usual, stupid swinging thing he does sometimes. So yeah, it was an interesting fight that I'd like to see again. I think Perez is probably, and this might be a controversial opinion, like in the broader scheme of things, I think he's pretty comfortably a top three-ish flyweight at this point, just because I think Moreno gave Figueiredo a better fight, but I'm also not particularly sure how Moreno would do against someone like Perez. And honestly, Moreno might be broken after that Fig fight. That's very possible. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting fight. And I guess that segues right into Figueiredo cutting weight again since he took no damage and fighting Brandon Moreno. So I guess I'll start on this one. Figueiredo won that fight very, very clearly, in my opinion. Probably, like, even with the point deduction, he didn't really deserve to lose it. He won 4, maybe 5 rounds. I remember round 4 being reasonably close and then Moreno having the biggest moment. But either way, that was a pretty clear Fig win, and it being a draw is just another thing in the long annals of UFC judging incompetence. But it was an interesting fight, and Figueiredo, as I mentioned against Perez, Figueiredo did a really, really nice job limiting the volume of Moreno just with his pressure and his counterpunching, especially to the body. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'll turn it over to Ed for elaborating on that.
Yeah, I don't totally remember all the details of their striking exchanges, so I won't speak too much on that. Although it was disconcerting as the fight got longer and things got a little messier. You had Fig like completely turning his back, like breaking his stance and like looking away and getting hit super clean while all those things were occurring and like not being that bothered. So his chin is unreal and his cardio is a lot better than people expected. So those are some things that definitely stuck out. I watched it live with Sriram. We did commentary on it. That's on our Patreon if you want to check that out. And we both agreed about the scoring. And while it was happening, we also were both saying like, "Oh man, I can definitely see how the judges would get this one wrong," and they did. So that's a fair assumption. But the thing that was really bothering me about this fight was Figueiredo not knowing what to do about body locks. He was swinging
Yeah.
big, which is how Moreno was getting a lot of those entries, but he kept going double overhooks to counter the double unders. But he wasn't doing anything with his feet, and he wasn't really using the double overhooks. He was just standing up straight and letting Moreno, move him around and get his angle to finish it. I don't know why, if he thought he was going to do something else, if he had some other plans, but you got to get your hips back. You got to create some sort of separation. You got to pummel at least. At the very least, you got to get your hips back because you're probably going to get body locked right away if someone gets a quick entry on you and you don't bring your hips back. So that really irked me because it happened a bunch of times. And like at least once to show the adaptation there. And Moreno didn't really get a lot done on top in any of the rounds as far as I remember, but just in terms of optics, it's always a bad look for judges to get taken down multiple times in a round. And that's been a theme with kind of bad decisions over the years is the people that got the not the close rounds, but the rounds that were kind of controversial that went the other way. There was usually a takedown or two in there that didn't really end up being anything. So you just to be a person that wins fights in 2020, you have to be someone that can defend most types of takedowns, or at least like if they throw it at you 5 times, you gotta defend it a couple of those times. And he looked pretty hopeless in that space, and that was really disappointing to me, just because I would like our champions to not be inept in any spaces. So maybe it's just a really specific thing, but it's looking like Fig's wrestling is turning more and more into like a counter type of game rather than sticking to the fundamentals and fighting grips and getting his hips in the right place and doing all the things you would want him to do.
Yeah, the body locks happened in the Formiga fight too. And that seemed to be a persistent weakness for him. I thought his single leg defense in the Perez fight looked pretty much fine. He was whizzering, and I think he fought grips if I remember correctly. But the body lock thing just seems to be like a weird just gap. So I'm not sure if he'll be able to patch that up or if that'll just be a consistent thing where guys can then find the body lock entry when they want it and get him down. But his recovery on the ground did look very good, and Moreno couldn't do much on top. But like you said, it's never a good look for the judges, and not everybody is like that. Like you can't just dynamism your way off the bottom all the time. There's going to be guys who can hold you down. There's going to be guys who can catch submissions in transition or scramble with you to keep you on the mat. As for the striking, yeah, I agree that it was not a good decision. I don't see much of a case for giving Moreno anything but the fourth round. He was competitive in some of the rounds, but Figueiredo was clearly landing the much harder, cleaner strikes with more impact. I think a lot of this goes to judges and fans not really scoring body shots well. Fig was really just destroying his body, landing clean, hard, murderous body shots that had a clear, immediate impact on Moreno. And Moreno was working the body too, but they were very clearly not the same. Moreno would throw like a slapping lead hook to the body and kind of like often land with the inside of his fist or his wrist, where Figueiredo was pounding him with the knuckles, and you could see the impact like immediately from just watching it collide with Moreno's body. And you could see the impact on Moreno's face. There was quite a few times where Fig would land a big body shot, Moreno would screw his face up or his posture would immediately change. And you could tell that the body shots were doing serious damage there. As for the striking exchanges, how they played out technically, I haven't watched the fight since it happened, so I don't have too detailed thoughts on that. But I think the most impressive part of the fight for both guys was the adjustments they made. Figueiredo, increasingly as the fight went on, found the range on his counters and figured out how to take Moreno's shots away from him. He started increasingly countering the jab, used that body work to take away Moreno's entries. And Moreno, he wasn't having as much success in the counter. And that was a bit of a problem because he was forced onto the back foot. So Figueiredo was able to limit his volume somewhat through pressure and through body work. And that's kind of like the big issue with Moreno when he's fighting Figueiredo is that he's really a pace fighter. He needs those exchanges and to push a pace, but Figueiredo is able to limit his pace and volume through that pressure. And Moreno isn't really the kind of fighter who's able to deny exchanges or who's able to operate really effectively on the outside. And I think that would be what Fig struggles the most with. So Moreno, if he's fighting Figueiredo, he has to be exchanging with him to win. And he kind of lacks some of the defense necessary to do that safely. And it's always going to be hard to pick against Figueiredo in exchanges. But Moreno did do a good job kind of building reads later into the fight. He caught onto that head kick where Figueiredo was kind of entering into a crouch, or he would kind of let his guard go when he was backing out of exchanges, and he would lean off to his open side where Moreno could throw up that lead leg head kick. So he did a better job figuring out how to hit Figueiredo, but he never really solved the issue of how to exchange safely with Figueiredo. And I think that's going to be a real issue in a rematch. As you guys mentioned, there's the durability aspect. Both Moreno and Fig are absurdly durable, and that was just a ridiculously gutsy and impressive performance from Moreno in terms of toughness. And you got to ask, like, can he hold up again? Can he take those shots in a rematch? Can he get into a firefight with Figueiredo and still come out the other end okay? So I think if for him to beat Figueiredo in a rematch, it would be prudent to try and add more mitigation tactics instead of to figure out a way to deny exchanges and punish Figueiredo for initiating them. I'd like to see some more kind of outside footwork, pivoting around and changing directions on the cage so he can get back into open space without letting Figueiredo pressure him to the cage when he wants. So I think that would be good to see from Moreno in a rematch. From Fig, really, I think just doing what he's doing should work. Figueiredo is weird because he makes bad decisions, like you mentioned with the body locks, but he also has a really, really great idea of how to adjust in a fight and how to just how to hurt the guy he's fighting. So I trust Figueiredo that if Moreno comes out with some new tactics, that he can kind of get a read on that later in the fight and figure out how to punish him for it. But I think the onus is kind of on Moreno to figure out something different. Because if the fight plays out like it did this time, I think Figueiredo will win pretty clearly again, and hopefully the judges would recognize it if it happens that way again.
Yeah, I mean, I think even past Figueiredo being such a good adjuster, it's something that our friend Taxerize has mentioned, is that he's very good at knowing what to do at the beginning of the fight. That is in terms of initial adjustments. As I mentioned with Perez, it was the body work to limit the volume. And here against Moreno, it was also body work, but he also came in with a very good idea of what to do against what many people thought Moreno's biggest threat would be, which would be his pretty decent lead hand, in that he could jab to draw out counters, put that left kick behind it. He did some clever uppercut work against Figueiredo-Perez, I believe, and played it off the hook against Jussier Formiga.
Everybody does clever work against Figueiredo-Perez.
Sure, but yeah, I mean, either way, it was a threat that I think people thought Figueiredo would have to worry about, and that if Moreno could just get him reacting to the lead hand, the variance in it, and start building off it, it'll be something that Figueiredo wouldn't be prepared for. But Figueiredo came out pressuring hard, drawing out the jab, either pulling from it or cross-countering it from like the first minute of the fight. I think he visibly hurt him with the cross-counter in like the first round where Moreno ate it and just kind of like, you could see him being hurt by it. But in general, yeah, I think Figueiredo had a very good idea of how to address that fight. And honestly, I think there are a lot more concrete things for Figueiredo to handle in that fight than there are for Moreno, where for Moreno, it's like become prime Jussier Formiga, where for Figueiredo, it's get better. Like even against Moreno, I believe it was in the second round where he defended a body lock kind of decently, were kind of framed on the inside. And honestly, his strength margin gives him like a lot of margin for dealing with stuff like that if he's just a little bit smarter about it. Like even the double overhooks thing, we've seen guys like Francisco Trinaldo just yeet guys from that. If that's something that he wants to do, I guess that's an approach that would probably work for him. But Yeah, I think there's a lot more like specific concrete things for Figueiredo to work on in terms of having that kind of big advantage in the pocket. I'd like to see him do the open side kicking a bit more, because he did that against Moreno and got pretty much all of them for free, at least on the arms. Kicked him in the head a couple times.
He
So
rocked him with a head kick in round 1, I think.
yeah, like Moreno kind of got a head kick blocked, and Rogan was like,
And then
"Oh
Rogan
God."
freaked out. And then Figueiredo actually rocked him with a head kick, and Rogan was pretty much silent.
Yeah, Fig just straight up domed him with the head kick, and it was all Anik going like, "Ooh," like, that's a saucy one. But yeah, Figueiredo could probably get away with doing that more. I believe in round 5 kind of gives an idea of if Figueiredo had like a big cardio liability, which he did kind of gas out in round 4. But if Figueiredo did feel like he needed to address the cardio a bit more with his pacing, round 4 gives him a decent like kind of blueprint on how to do it, especially if Moreno doesn't want to walk into that fire over and over. He was able to play a bit more of a composed counterpunching game. I think the biggest issue for Figueiredo at this point in terms of career progression, because I don't see Moreno beating him in a rematch, is that if he plans to go up to 135, the wrestling is going to be very problematic against someone like Aljamain Sterling. And he's probably going to get that kind of fight as soon as he goes up, which, like, if he goes up and he fights like Rob Font or something, like, who cares? But against someone who, like, even a Peter Yan, who's smart enough to take the fight to that kind of area, 135 is going to be pretty nasty for him, but it's going to be fun. And I think Figueiredo Yan is still a fight that I'd really like to see. So, what else happened over the last couple months? This is a very unstructured
Oliveira-Ferguson was a relatively big deal, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think the fact that it turned out to be a referendum on Ferguson was unfortunate for Oliveira because, as we mentioned on the live stream, it looked like something that Oliveira would do to many iterations of Ferguson. But what did you think of the fight, Ed?
It was kind of boring, to be honest with you. It definitely wasn't what I expected. But yeah,
like grappling.
It was mostly just Oliveira controlling top position and Ferguson getting nothing done the entire fight. Nothing.
You almost did a buggy choke.
Has anyone ever actually almost did a buggy choke? But yeah, I mean, there wasn't even anything like that damning with regard to Oliveira getting it to the ground. Like, yeah, Tony definitely looks flatter and less dynamic physically. So you could say he's definitely in shot territory. I mean, he's looked less physically for a couple of years now. But I mean, the entries were things that I think Oliveira could have always done. He had a good read on Tony's kicking game and countered. I think that was one of his 3 takedowns. He only had 1 takedown per round because Tony never got up. He had a good read on the kicks and countered that. I think he caught a like a front snap kick and took him down off of that. Yeah. Like tripped out the base leg. I think he had a shot against the cage. They may have pressured him there. And I forgot what the other one was, but yeah, just, reactive shots, as people like Ben Cohn pointed out, that Oliveira is pretty good at getting, typically against most opponents. And Ferguson, when he does get taken down, it's usually because he throws himself forward into those kinds of situations. So nothing that was like, crazy surprising on paper, just the way it looked though, just how little resistance Ferguson was really able to offer. So I guess I kind of want to defer to Ryan. Did you feel that Oliveira's top game looked significantly improved, or was it more of a case of Ferguson not really doing anything to actually like get up or threaten?
Sorry, we cut off there a little bit. Could you repeat the last 10 seconds?
Did Oliveira's top game look better against Ferguson, or was it more a case of it's the same and Ferguson wasn't really doing the right things to make it a fight?
Yeah, I definitely think Oliveira's top game looked better. I also think that Ferguson's bottom game has always been kind of significantly overrated in terms of like how effective it's actually going to be against strong top players. Like we saw Kevin Lee mount him fairly easily in the first round, and then he gassed out, which was fine. And Ferguson did a good job encouraging that. Like he had the feet on hips guard where he would post his feet on the hips, control the wrists, angle off, and then elbow him. And that really messed with Lee's gas tank, both in forcing him to work and just allowed Ferguson to rack up damage while doing it. But the thing with that is that that's the only really time we've seen him play that bottom game super effectively against an elite top player. And Kevin Lee never passed on the feet at all. Like I went back and watched his career in the UFC after that fight, and he didn't pass on the feet a single time in any of his fights. All of his passes were from the knees, which is pretty important because Ferguson's guard is based around creating distance with his feet and putting the frames there so you can't close in on him and hold him down. And then he'll use that when guys try to push in. He'll collapse the frames. He'll kind of draw his knees back to his chest so you come forward and he can elbow you. He can set up submissions with that, and it just messes with guys that are trying to hold him down because they're constantly being like pushed and pulled away, and they can't get that control over him. But passing from the knees really kills that, or passing from the feet really kills that. And I think that's why I've never liked Ferguson in a fight with Khabib, because when he goes to that feet on hips guard and tries to play open guard, Khabib's just going to stand, punch him, and slice through the guard. And that's what Oliveira did here. He didn't hang around on the knees when Ferguson was creating distance and guard. He would just stand, stack, fold. He would like reach under Ferguson's legs and then stack him on his hips. So he'd end up like on his shoulder with his legs kind of folded back. And then from there, Oliveira could just walk around to side control. He could work on taking the back, or he could just punch him. And you saw a few times they ended up in that like reverse mount situation where they were like 69ing basically because he would do the stack pass and then Ferguson would try to kind of sneak out the back door. But yeah, so I think that was always going to be a bad fight in respect to that, because Oliveira isn't the type that's going to try and force his way through your frames on the ground. He'll just work around them. But the way I was really impressed with Oliveira's top game, and the way I think it's really improved, is that he was so well put together. He wasn't, if you watch his fight with like Ricardo Lamas or Anthony Pettis, he's super scrambly on the ground. He'll when he gets on top, he'll immediately try to make something happen. He'll go for a front headlock, and he'll be willing to like pull guard or go to his back with it, or when he takes the back, he'll immediately start trying to attack, and it gives guys opportunities to work out. He didn't do that here at all. He didn't sacrifice position to go for submission. And well, it's not as exciting to watch as an Oliveira that's just diving on random shit and trying really hard to submit the guy. It's a lot more consistently successful at an elite level of MMA. And especially what I was impressed with is how he used his submissions to facilitate his top control. So instead of giving up position with them, he'd threaten a Kimura to like pass half guard or threaten a front headlock to force Ferguson back to his back, and he wouldn't hold on to the submission past the point where it became risky. He would just, if you're trying to turn into him, he'll go for a front headlock. Either you keep turning into him and he gets to lock up the guillotine, or you go back to your back and then he'll let it go because he realizes that holding top position is more useful in that situation than trying to sell out on a submission. And the moment that really sold this for me is when he was in mount and Ferguson kind of tried to buck him off, and he hit that triangle where you whizzer on one side and then use their frame on the ground on the other side to swing the leg over and lock up a triangle. So he hit that when Ferguson was trying to bridge out a mount, and then he was working it on the ground or on his back, and instead of really committing to the submission and trying to submit him from his back, he went with the sweep and swept Ferguson back to top position, and then let go of the triangle and just chilled on top of him. So again, not super exciting. He's not like trying super hard to submit the guy, but that's what you want to see out of a submission artist in MMA, is somebody who recognizes that he can use the submissions to facilitate that positional control, and that he doesn't need to abandon position for them and risk putting himself in inferior positions. And obviously, Oliveira still has the submission chops where he can actually finish those, because he almost broke Tony's arm in the first round. So overall, I was really impressed with Oliveira, and I thought it was kind of almost a culmination point of his game, where we've seen him work through different phases where he was really kind of mentally not all there. He would kind of fold when situations got tough or when he was taking a lot of damage. And we saw him be really scrambly and jumpy on the ground and willing to sacrifice position. And this is, I think, what he is now is kind of almost the final point where his style really comes together and we see what his potential is. In regards to his wrestling, that was interesting too, because I don't think we've really seen Tony against the body locker at all. And it's kind of weird in MMA how you can just the nature of MMA makes it so that it's really hard to get an entire picture of somebody's skill set. And we've seen Ferguson use his strong front headlock game against guys who like to shoot. He's very scrambly, and he's good at kind of scrambling out of those shot takedowns as well. But we've really never seen him fight a strong body locker, I don't think, except Kevin Lee, who kind of took him down pretty easily with that. And so I think in terms of like where Tony was in this fight, did Oliveira win because he was shot, or would he have always beaten him? I think that the body locks were always going to be a thing, and that was hard for Tony to deal with. Obviously, he was super physically declined. He's like 37 now, and like you said, he's looked fragile in quite a few of his recent fights. But I would like Oliveira to beat any version of Ferguson based on both the sound top control and the ability to work around his frames and guard. And I think body locks are going to be generally harder for Tony to deal with than shot takedowns as well.
Mm-hmm. That's all. It's a very comprehensive breakdown. I was just enjoying that. I was also thinking it's just nice to have Oliveira in this form in the division, because with Khabib leaving, the division is the same. You know what I mean? It's all these strikers at the top, and there's all these theories floating around based on what Khabib did to Conor and Dustin and Gaethje. That like those guys are like completely useless as wrestlers or grapplers or whatever. And I think it's degrees of truth, obviously, and we have our own thoughts about where all those guys stand in those respects. But just to have Oliveira there and to continue to be able to provide that test, like if he fought Dustin Poirier, if he fought Justin Gaethje, if he fought Conor, whatever it is, Dan Hooker, you'd be able to see like, okay, here's someone that is a competent wrestler, powerful, athletic, great top game, great submission threat. Like he's still offering those threats, and he's looked less fragile both mentally and physically. We talked about this Dan Tom on one of the previous shows. He's definitely grown into the weight class. Definitely looking thicker, and I think he's a full-fledged lightweight now, and a physical problem for the division as well. So we just get to continue to see those matchups play out and maybe get some more answers just about where these guys stand. I think I'm most interested to see him fight Justin Gaethje, because that's a test, the ultimate test for both of them, right? You have a murderous puncher who's going to come out his body and his legs and try to break him immediately, and you have someone that is pretty good at finding their opportunities to wrestle. And if it goes to the ground, that's going to be do or die for Gaethje. You're going to say, okay, is he confident whatsoever, or is he just going to get, is someone good at all is going to insta-sub him? And even if he did get submitted by Charles Oliveira, I wouldn't say that's like, oh, Gaethje doesn't have a ground game, because we're talking about one of the best grapplers in the UFC at this point. But at the same time, I'm interested to see those things, those dynamics replay with those guys. And, knowing the UFC, he's going to fight down in contention now and be a gatekeeper for the top 5 and never get a crack at any of them.
Yeah, speaking of that, Oliveira was supposed to fight Michael Chandler on debut. That was actually the plan before Hooker. So you were actually spot on. I think Oliveira against someone like Dustin Poirier would be relatively interesting as well, just because like if he gets guillotined, that's just the ultimate reversion to the mean for Charles Oliveira. But there are a ton of winnable fights for Oliveira up at the top, especially since the title fight is Poirier against McGregor, and both of them have looked various levels of grappleable in the past. So Oliveira could have success there, even if he could just get sunk with his defense not being the best still. Ferguson didn't have a ton of success on the feet, but also that fight was like 85% on the ground. So it's tough to say. But Oliveira's an interesting challenge. I think he'd be kind of interesting to see if Nurmagomedov ever comes back. I'm not sure it'd be like a super winnable fight, like a grappler against.
It wouldn't.
Nurmagomedov.
It really wouldn't.
But it's also not any less compelling than any rematch that's out there for Khabib at this point. So, there's really not. I guess we've pretty much done the UFC 256 recap show. There's not a ton else to talk about. There's the next card is in about 2 or 3 weeks, and it's a pretty exciting one. Max Holloway against Calvin Kattar, and then like 2 other. I forgot Leon was canceled, but one other good fight that week. But I guess now it's time to handle the Patreon request from Mr. Lee, since we're pretty much done with the recap stuff. So the best unathletic fighters in MMA was the request, and I'd like to start this off by saying Beneil Dariush is the greatest fighter of all time.
That's fair. Before we get into it, I would just, I mean, the Evan in his request basically laid out what I wanted to say originally. So he didn't say who were the best unathletic fighters in MMA, but he said, the typical athletic mold that people think about is, explosive, fast, powerful people like that. So Jose Aldo, Chad Mendez, Yoel Romero, that type of dude.
Glad you snuck a white guy in there.
Thank you. Well, he's mostly white, partially white. I don't know. He might not be white at all. But
his name is Mendez, but close enough.
Mendez
At least
Portuguese.
It's not Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I'm no Rogan, but maybe a little bit racist in this instance. But yeah, those are probably some of the most athletic fighters in the history of MMA, and they definitely fit the very stereotypical popular mold of what an athlete is, because people who watch sports, at least North American fans, they watch basketball, they watch American football, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for like their combine stats, like how fast can you run a 40, or what do they bench or whatever. You know what I mean? How high can they jump? Whereas in MMA, all that stuff that works a lot. It's very beneficial to be that type of athlete, but it's not the only type of athlete. And it's not the only type of athleticism that can be leveraged into wins. And I think a lot of, the endurance athlete is also an unheralded formula. The thing is, and maybe it is a little bit of a racial bias, where guys who are more endurance athletes who can put on volume and have good cardio and can pace people and are durable, they're usually, it's all chalked up to hard work, and it is chalked up to hard work, but athletic ceilings go both ways. I mean, the how high can you jump with training and jumping high there's similar caps on it to how good can your cardio be. Like, if I work as hard as I possibly can and Ryan works as hard as he possibly can, and we do the same exact things, we're going to have different cardio ceilings just by virtue of whatever our natural limits are. So, things like cardio aren't really treated as athleticism, which I think is bogus. So it should be, but we definitely, Evan specified, let's just talk about the guys who don't fit that traditional mold, the ones who aren't particularly fast or explosive or powerful. So that the people that, you would say are unathletic, but the whole time I'm going to be saying, but actually here are some of the physical attributes that are pretty, solid for X fighter, like Beneil Dariush. He's not physically inept. He's physically talented. You see him do things like he can kick hard, he can punch hard, he can grapple. He looks strong when he grapples. A lot of it might just be your eyes lying to you because his body is disgusting. It's just like no definition, no ass. It's just like you're like, okay, so maybe not. He's not like flying all over the place. So you're like, all right, whatever. Maybe not an incredible athlete, but I think he is pretty solid physically. But just nothing that jumps off the page. So I'm going to be playing devil's advocate pretty much.
When we're talking about guys who are still very good in MMA despite not being great athletes, I think it's usually going to end up being like the Dariush type that's not athletically deficient, but is clearly a step below the elite. Like Dariush, he has power, but a lot of his power is a factor of both putting a lot of weight into his strikes and like throwing good kicks and punches. But like you said, he's not a bad athlete. But I think that you can't really be a bad athlete and still be competitive with very good fighters. If you look at somebody like Chris Gritzmacher, like the guy who beat up Joe Lozon, you can give him all the skills in the world and the best training, but what's he gonna do?
Still gets got by Alexander Hernandez in
you're never gonna. A guy like that, there's just a very hard ceiling on how good he's able to be in MMA, just out of sheer physicality. He's not going to have the power to compete with stronger strikers. He's not going to have the strength and athleticism to be able to defend takedown from very physical wrestlers. So I think that usually when we talk about the guys who are able to really make an athleticism disparity work in the face of greater athleticism, they're usually going to be guys like Formiga and Beneil Dariush, who aren't at all deficient, but who are just a clear step below the elite. Because if you're really just not an athlete at all, then you're probably not going to be in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's another thing with lightweight specifically, where like pretty much every elite has like one really, really, really hard athletic spike. Where, like, for example, someone like Dustin Poirier can just go for days, and Gaethje is like super durable and can go for days, and Khabib Nurmagomedov's like super strong in tie-ups and has really good cardio himself, and Ferguson pretty much lives off going for days. And Dariush is like, if you let him beat you up for a round uninterrupted, he gasses out, which is pretty normal. And he can't just like kill you with a bad punch the way someone like Dustin Poirier might be able to. So it's like, it's not anything super bad, but also in comparison to like a really good division where you need really good athletic attributes to work, it's going to be pretty tough. And I think Jussi Formiga is another good example, just because like his game isn't built to be that kind of scrambly type. And that's kind of what's defined flyweight throughout its entire existence, is guys being able to just scramble forever. And Formiga might not have like the cardio necessarily to do that. He also might not, but he's also built a game where he doesn't need to. Like, Dustin Ortiz can theoretically scramble for days, but against Formiga, it just doesn't matter whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Formiga, just, each of these guys is going to have at least one attribute that lets them do their thing. And for Formiga, I mean, he has a finesse game, right? So, there's a certain degree of agility required for that. He's definitely looked quick, executing on a lot of the things he does. But it's not like, oh my God, what an athlete. Just like, yeah, that was fast. He did that well. But a lot of that is like, it's the muscle memory. He's got drilled in super tight, so he can hit it reliably at what full speed looks like for him. Whereas someone like Khabib, people freak out about Khabib's athleticism. And it's like, on one hand, I think it's a little overrated. Like, he's not blowing me out of the water with what he can do physically, but also like he can go 100% in pretty big bursts and still be doing things kind of badly mechanically and still like look like it's going super fast. He's going super hard, and he's able to make things work and just push through and strong you and like bully you. And like someone like Formiga could never do that. Whereas like Yoel Romero can like just be chilling and then out of nowhere jump 10 feet in the air and flying knee. Like Michael Chandler, for example, in the Eddie Alvarez rematch, it's round 4. And round 3 was the round where he slowed down significantly and looked like he was gassing. And then very early on in round 4, he hits Eddie Alvarez with an insane flying knee just from static standing position. So that's the kind of stuff that would separate them, as Ryan alluded to. So we talked about Formiga, we talked about Beneil Dariush. Somebody, and you might, there's going to be a lot of grapplers on here, I would say. But people with two guys with kind of similar athletic types, I would say, are Damian Maia and Ben Askren. And Maia way more successful in MMA, I would say for sure. But those are guys that are kind of slow, not explosive in the least bit, not particularly durable either. Well, Askren, pretty durable actually. I changed my mind. But pretty decent cardio with some limits there, but not outstanding athletes, not jumping off the page in any respect. I'm sure they're both pretty strong in a grappling sense, as most grapplers are compared to people who aren't grapplers. And their grips must be pretty strong. But those are two guys that mostly had to like game, their wins, and it wasn't really them like overwhelming people in any one stage, which is pretty impressive. Just because like if you ever talk to a wrestler who had a decent competitive experience, and you ask them about what it was like to wrestle someone that was really good in like folk style, for example, they'll tell you like they weren't really doing anything different. It wasn't any like it was something you hadn't seen before when they got top position. They were just insanely strong, and you couldn't get them off of you. And like once they got your wrist, they had it, and you couldn't get it back, and they could just move you in whatever way they wanted. And that's not what it looks like with like Maia and Askren. You know what I mean? It's like they're just doing things. Oh, Askren less so, but it's because they're doing a lot of things correctly. It's because they're moving through the sequences, and they have a lot of skill in those areas. So I think those are guys that were pretty successful without any big athletic advantages.
I want to bring Formiga back up for a moment because I think
Sure.
He's, I think, one of the best examples of somebody who has a really successful game based around like mitigating what his opponent's doing. Usually in MMA, just with the sheer variety of attacks that are available, we've seen a meta that tends toward volume and aggression. It's generally much more consistently successful to focus on your offense and just doing your thing rather than kind of reacting to the opponent and trying to like take things away from them reactively. So you'll see guys like Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski kind of really epitomize that meta in MMA, where volume and aggression and continually doing your thing over and over again results in a lot of success. And Formiga is kind of the direct opposite of that. And in a lot of ways, that's a response to that meta, where guys have become very aggressive and volume focused, and Formiga can't really play that game because he doesn't have the durability. He probably doesn't have the cardio to throw a ton of volume, and he's not a hitter at all. So if he's going to be exchanging with guys, he has to be very careful about when and how he does it. And looking at his game really kind of gives you the principles of how you can kind of play that game. He uses positioning on the feet very effectively to deny exchanges and to control distance. So if you watch any Nova União striker fight, they're always very good at positioning. And Formiga always has his foot trained on his opponent's center line. He's always in position to defend, hit, and counter. And he's great at using proactive and reactive defense to limit exchanges. So if when guys are coming at him and trying to exchange, he'll keep himself in position to defend and respond. And he's great at, instead of getting drawn into exchanges and punching with guys, he'll throw one or two punches and then either pivot away, change direction to exit the exchange and prevent the opponent from following up, or he'll enter the clinch. He has great reactive clinch entries. The one he hit on Zach Makovsky is one of my favorite entries into the clinch I've seen in MMA, where it was a southpaw orthodox matchup. Makovsky was a southpaw. He was angling out towards Makovsky's open side to draw out the rear hand, and he just slipped outside of it and pivoted right to his back. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then he hit that sick Vieira roll right after.
Yeah.
So he does like really, really slick reactive entries like that. He has great reactive takedown entries as well. So everything in his game is kind of based around preventing the opponent from feeling comfortable opening up. And you really saw that in the Figueiredo fight, where Figueiredo is just the absolute opposite end of that spectrum. Ridiculous dynamism, doesn't even give a shit about what the other guy's doing. He's just going to do his thing and completely ignore you. You can punch him in the face. He does not give a fuck. He'll just take it and rip your body. And he has the durability to make that work. Like, it almost doesn't matter what you're hitting Figueiredo with. He does not give a shit. And Formiga didn't try to go with it and hit him harder. He took the opposite tack and just nullified his offense, which we've seen from the Moreno and the Alex Perez fight is not something that many other guys even try to do or have the skill set to do. And it left Figueiredo kind of confused about how to attack him. You saw him consistently getting into those reactive clinch entries and using positioning on the outside to deny any kind of exchanges or opportunities for Figueiredo to hit him hard. So I think Formiga, Rafael Assunção is also a great example of using those kind of mitigation tactics to prevent stronger, faster, harder punchers from creating the situations in which they can really leverage those advantages. The fight between Assunção and Font is a perfect example of how to do that with boxing. He stood just outside Font's jabbing range and consistently made Font jab into his outstretched rear hand to give him a false distance. Then when Font tried to close distance with a double jab or by running into the pocket, Formiga would just throw one counterpunch and pivot off. So he very effectively limited a very good boxer, a very good combination puncher and pocket operator, completely denied him the opportunity to exchange at all. And I think that's kind of the height of somebody, Assunção and Formiga are kind of the apex of guys with significant athletic disadvantages relative to the elite of their division, using clever tactics to manage to allow them to still compete with elite fighters.
Yeah, I mean,
and I know Sriram has a massive boner now.
A ton, yeah. a literal ton. But yeah, I think Assunção is an interesting example just because bantamweight has like such a wide range of different sorts of athletes, and we've seen Assunção face pretty much all of them. For example, Pedro Munoz had some of that Figueiredo type appeal where you could just hit him and he would just keep walking forward and kicking your legs. And we saw Assunção keep him off with like these clever clinch entries and turning to the fence, and the inside stance, or the inside angles from open stance thing that he does to pretty much everyone. The big output athlete like TJ Dillashaw and Rob Font and Marlon Moraes, who is kind of like a blend of a big power athlete and an output athlete, kind of. And pretty much everyone's looked kind of useless against Assunção. Yeah, now. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I guess we should talk about Rob Font just completely killing Marlon Moraes, because I know you'll enjoy that.
Yeah, that also happened.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's a good example of what the disadvantages of being a traditionally athletic fighter, because with those kind of attributes, you can really build your game, with them, like as a huge part of your success. Whereas guys that really didn't have them as much, they had to develop their skill set other ways, and uh, they age better. They age more gracefully. We talked about Tim Means before the podcast when we were brainstorming fighters. That's someone who was pretty solid in his prime, at his peak. He's really not that much worse now than he was then. You can tell he's older and it's harder for him to do things, but it doesn't look all that different. He's still able to do most of what he did because his game was really never athletically leveraged, whereas someone like Marlon Moraes, well, first of all, his durability is pretty shot. But that's a good example, is he didn't become the defensive fighter he needed to be because he could, scare people off with firepower or get out of the way or whatever you want to say. But yeah, interesting contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could look at a fight like Assunção Font now, and Assunção probably wouldn't win because he's also pretty much shot at this point. But he'd also have a couple more moments than I think Marlon Moraes would, just because he's, a bit more accustomed to dealing with someone with greater firepower who might just try to run towards him the way Font did. Where Moraes is probably going to struggle in most of the rematches he at this point. Like against Jimmy Rivera, might just kick him in the head again. But if that went longer, I'd still be pretty concerned, more than I was the first time. So yeah,
Sunsound's been around for a lot longer than Moraes too, so him lasting longer is even more pronounced. Moraes started in 2007 and Assunção started in 2004. And you can already see Moraes starting to drop off way heavier than Assunção.
Yeah, I mean, Assunção fought like an old man for his entire career. That's like pretty much the explanation. Like he never had the athletic attributes to lean on, but even if he did, Assunção was never like chinny or like super slow in like exchanges or anything, but he never fought like he wasn't, which meant that when he did get kind of slower and less durable, aside from the Cody Garbrandt fight, could kind of get away with doing what he was doing. So, I mean, even if you look at a fight like Corey Sandhagen, right? Like if Marlon Moraes didn't have the volume edge over a guy, he just didn't really know what to do or how to win that fight. Whereas Assunção, he was used to that, and when he was fighting a dynamo who would just keep throwing things at him, he kind of had some ideas, even if he got overwhelmed late. So yeah, I mean, Formiga and Assunção were really good examples at the elite level of small divisions that have attributes that probably wouldn't help older fighters otherwise. Who else?
Roxanne Modafferi.
I think
the
that's
hardest working fighter in mixed martial arts history. There's someone that is pretty much, and I'm not saying she is very skilled. As a grappler, she seems solid. But that is someone who not only would you say that she's unathletic, but she actually seems to be a little bit working with like almost like a handicap physically. Like she's had to learn how to move her body in a lot of ways. It's like probably someone that didn't play sports at all growing up into adulthood. And MMA training was probably her first foray into physical things. Maybe she grappled in some form, but yeah, that's a great example of someone that really committed themselves. And I know that she like works really, really hard with strength and conditioning and like becoming functional, physically. So it is possible. It is possible for people to improve physically. I mean, like RDA, for example, if you watch his early UFC fights, not much there. And then versus his prime, like an absolute physical beast. And you can say that steroids, but you still have to do the work to get the use out of the steroids. You know what I mean?
It's not like the guys he's fighting are probably clean anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's fighting Gleison Tebow.
There's no way.
But yeah, we see people improve their athleticism and their physicality all the time. Like Dustin Poirier, for example, couldn't bench like the bar. I don't know what it was. Phil Daru, his strength and conditioning coach, said he like couldn't do like really basic physical things before they started working together, and it was like well into his UFC. It was like when he moved up to lightweight, that's when he started lifting and stuff, and that's when he became more of a hitter, more of a physical presence. So like people improve in that respect. It's just like, how do you spend your time? It does that, do you have to learn how to fight a different way? It's interesting. It's an interesting topic. So you wonder, like the people we consider unathletic, a lot of the time we're just looking at their bodies and figuring that out just from the eye test, which doesn't work if you're looking at like Kelvin Gastelum or Fedor or like Cain Velasquez. Those are very athletic people that just have body fat.
DC.
DC, yeah, extremely athletic
If you
fighters.
want to like examples of guys who don't look athletic at all but are ridiculously athletic, look at sumo in Japan.
Mhm.
The speed with which those guys operate at like fucking 500 pounds is ridiculous.
I don't watch sumo, but yeah, I'm sure it's
You should watch
incredibly
sumo. It's
demanding.
very fun.
Not
With my
sure
attention
how much of
span,
a
you think I
parallel.
would like it, but I haven't gotten
Yeah, they're
into
like
it
10-second fights.
yet.
Yeah, guys like Hakuho, they're absurdly fast, absurdly agile, and obviously they're doing all that at a weight and fat percentage way higher than any MMA fighters. So you definitely can't just rely on looking at guys. If they look like a melting fridge like Ben Askren, that's one thing, but just because they have fat content doesn't mean that they aren't super athletic.
Right. Anyone
Yeah, I
else?
mean, I'm not sure there's a parallel between, or like there's like the inverse is true where you look at someone super jacked and they're actually not athletic at all. Probably like the closest is just guys who aren't good at fighting and gas out super quickly.
That's the KSW like freak show fights of like the guys who are like just bodybuilders and have no like athletic carryover from that. Like they don't do anything functional. But I don't
Ivan
think we've seen
Shirkov.
anyone like that in the UFC
Oh yeah,
for a long
Shirkov.
time.
I think Shirkov tried to sign him, but he immediately popped or something like that, or they just knew he was gonna pop. One of those
Then he got his
things.
ass whooped by the best middleweight on the planet,
Magomed Ishmailov.
the GOAT.
Usually people like in the past 15 years, I don't think there's been anyone in the UFC who has like big muscles or like looks really strong or muscular that isn't also some sort of athlete. You know what I mean? It usually correlates. So
Yeah. Do you remember that old UFC fight between Brad Kohler and Steve Judson?
Oh
The one
yeah, I
where the guy
remember
does
that.
like the lunging punch and
Yeah.
knocks the other one out immediately.
yeah,
They
They're
look like
kind of like
action
that with
figures.
they look like they have the massive Warhammer style pauldrons on their shoulders, but it's just their shoulder muscles.
Oh, we talking pauldrons? We're getting into
That's why they weren't very good, because they had the pauldrons on.
massive Twitter war about pauldrons. Yeah,
Uh,
this
who
conversation
else?
evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I guess someone like Bilal Muhammad's a decent example, just someone who's had success against guys who outmatched him athletically. Like, for example, the Jeff Neal fight was a pretty good example of that, where Muhammad was like at a huge disadvantage in terms of hitting power and even like technical skill. But he just, figured something out in terms of the body work. Every heavyweight, almost, not really, but at least in comparison to like lower divisions, a lot of them tend to be worse athletically.
I think another important point to raise about athleticism is that even though in a lot of ways people who aren't as athletic have to develop tactics to compensate for that and have to be kind of craftier than athletic people, being super athletic really increases your skill ceiling. There's a lot of stuff that if you look at the absolute height of any combat sport, those people are going to be very athletic, and partly it's because athleticism just makes everything easier, but it also just allows you to be straight up better and more skilled in ways that lacking that athleticism doesn't. Like if you look at the stuff somebody like Jose Aldo or Habib does, on one hand, it's because they're like genuinely among the best technicians MMA has ever seen at what they do. But in many ways, their athleticism allowed them to develop that skills and to employ that. You just can't do what Aldo or Khabib is doing if you don't have that athleticism. You can know how to defend takedowns. You can know how to pivot away from exchanges. You can know how to limp leg out of single legs and everything. But you are absolutely not going to be able to employ those techniques at a high enough level if you don't have that athleticism. And when you can do it, it allows you to build on top of that and kind of uh, develop on those skills and really push the cutting edge of what those skills and tactics can look like in MMA. So I think that when you talk about guys that really change the metagame or introduce things to MMA that were before seen as not viable or not possible, those guys are going to necessarily be among the more athletic, because it's just those guys are just built differently. They can do things that other people can't.
I'm just built different. But yeah, I mean, you can even look at like, for example, we talked about the volume lifting thing that guys like Assunção do, and Jose Aldo did a good deal of that in his prime, just better against better competition, more reliably, because he is
Right. And
a
part of that
crazy
is
athlete who can
because,
just scare people off.
yeah, if you're trying to employ volume on Aldo, he can just smack you really fucking hard in the head. And then we've seen a lot of guys go out there with the intention of making him work and pressuring him, and they get hit, and then they realize that's a stupid fucking idea.
Well, now he does it to the body. He pulls up your guard and just smacks you really hard in the body and tells you to go away. It works pretty well.
For 2 rounds.
Old Aldo is still like top 20 athletic fighters in the UFC. I would say he's still very, very physically competent. He just, gasses out faster. So he can't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
4
You made me
meaningful things
sad.
per round. He won his last fight, Ryan. You can be happy for a little bit.
Yeah, but there's gonna be another one. It's probably gonna be against like Aljo.
5-round main event against Rob Fong.
Cody Garbrandt called him out, and I think that's actually kind of a safe fight. So I hope they do that one.
What if it's
Don't
5 rounds?
Love it.
I mean, what's Cody Garbrandt going to do over 5 rounds? That would be different. If he's going to lose, he's going to lose
Exist
pretty
in the last 2
quickly.
rounds. Yeah, but I mean,
I don't
also
think Cody's
like,
going to try to put on a 5-round performance against him.
I mean, also if like Aldo's just, we've been worried about his defense since like the Moraes fight. So if Cody
Does Cody ever get in your face and throw a 1-2? I don't think he does that.
That's true, but he could just like run towards Aldo, and Aldo's like, oh shit.
Get double leg, bitch.
Oh. Cody lap drops him.
He could. He's capable. He's capable of doing that. Jeez.
Now this has just turned into us being sad about Aldo.
I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean,
Gonna be on a win streak.
yeah, I think that's the end of the podcast. We're pretty much done with everything.
Probably.
Thanks for the request, Evan. Subscribe to the Patreon for more shit posting like this.
Yes, exactly. And next podcast will be about year-end awards, either declaring what they are or just talking about contenders based on if we've published them yet. But then soon we will have our Cater Holloway podcast, and we'll have the Cater Holloway panel, and Dan Albert is going to be on that.
Oh.
Get ready for that.
Wait, there's another Dan? We're just replacing our old Dan.
We have like at least 6 Dans in the queue.
There's entirely too many Dans.
Ready to call up if we lose any. It's definitely our most robust squadron.
We have like a 4th
people.
string Dan.
The Dan power rankings that have
The guy on the minor league team that we have to fill out a waiver to call up.
Dan Tom is our highest ranked Dan, but he's also very expensive, so we can afford.
I think
Dan
that's why
Alberts.
Danny quit.
Because
He knew he couldn't compete with Dan Tom.
There are no more Dannies. Danny is dead. It's just Dan now.
Yeah, he upgraded or downgraded, however you want to view it. Daniel, I think, is the worst option of the 3. No one wants to be Daniel.
Nobody under the age of 30 is named Daniel.
That's correct.
They're technically named Daniel. They just don't call themselves that.
I was Eddie for most of my life. I upgraded to Ed. Now that I'm
Eddie doesn't really seem fitting for you.
That's funny because people who hear that I am called Ed in other places don't see that on me either.
Huh.
So it's really
seem
whatever
like very clear Ed.
Whatever impression I give to you is what you think I am.
Yeah, I don't have the
control
luxury
your
of good
reality.
nicknames. But yeah, so I suppose that's it. This has gone pretty long. We've just been shitposting for about 3/4 of
What
it.
the people come for.
That's true.
Yeah, you come for the intelligent fight discussion, stay for the pauldron memes.
Yeah, so check out next time for the year-end stuff, and probably the time after that is going to be Cater Holloway, right? I don't know the schedule. Probably.
Yeah, that's the next UFC event.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Bye.